I used to believe that weddings distilled a life into one shining day, carefully lit, perfectly timed, beautifully staged. As if you could coax meaning out of flowers and fabric and a procession that started exactly at 6:30. Maybe I clung to that belief because so much of my life had been more rehearsed than lived, more approved than felt. That's how it was in our house. Feelings looked presentable only when they matched my mother's idea of them. Spine straight, Mira, my mother would say, tapping between my shoulder blades with the back of a comb. Not hard enough to bruise, just insistent enough to rearrange me. You slouch when you're uncertain. No one invests in uncertain. Investa, word she used for everything, even smiles. We were not rich, not the kind of rich that forgot what a sales tag looked like. But we were comfortable because my father, Imran, had weathered decades of long hours and fried nerves to build a small but steady accounting firm. He wore decency like a pressed shirt. My mother, Farah, wore ambition like perfume. My brother Daniel disappeared into headphones and code as soon as he could. The house was always immaculate. Polished floors, clean lines, a soft rug nobody was allowed to spill tea on. It never smelled like food. Not really. It smelled like lemon cleaner and restraint. And then there was my Aunt Bois in the old way. Though my mother insisted we modernize to Aunt Sarah, my father's younger sister. A kind of soft rebellion wrapped in a cotton. Sorry. With hair she always forgot to tame in eyes that drifted somewhere past you. Sarah collected small, quiet jobs tutoring children. Managing a tiny library at the community center land, lived in a second-floor apartment that gathered dust and sun equally. She was the only person in our family who remembered birthdays without a group chat reminder. Who saved the clay animals we made as children? Once, long ago, she used to live with us. When my grandmother died, she stayed, and then one day she didn't. That story, like so many others, had edges no one explained. Don't romanticize her, my mother would say when she caught me listening at the periphery of grown-up arguments. She's soft. Softness doesn't survive. It was always in that tone, like a diagnosis. Sarah was soft. My mother, by implication, was not. And to survive, apparently, you had to be more like Farah. There was something else my mother said a lot. Remember, we are the ones people look at. And people were looking now. The wedding was days away. My wedding. You're lucky, Mira, my mother had said when Kareem proposed, her gratitude so sharp it nearly cut the word. He's from such a respectable family. Respectable old Karachi money. The Siddiquis owned property and good opinions. Kareem was gentle, careful with his words, with a kind of posture that suggested he had never been told to straighten it. He had a laugh like the start of rain and an engineer's way of solving everything with diagrams and patience. We met through work. I ran brand narratives for an NGO that partnered with his renewable energy venture. He sent me numbers, and I turned them into stories. We're literally a power couple. He had joked once, grinning, and I laughed too loudly because I wanted it to be true. I also wanted to believe that his mother, Nasreen, would eventually approve of me or at least stop counting the ways I might be improved. You're pretty, she would say, like something she had decided to concede, but in a quieter way. It's elegant. We can make that work. I'm not sure what we meant. She meant fittings, mostly. Fittings for the pale gold lahanga she insisted on. Fittings for my smile in rooms where I needed to seem grateful but not too ambitious. Demure but not shy. Modern but not disruptive. Be light, she advised, like cream, like silk. When I told her cream stains, she laughed with her mouth, not her eyes. I wanted to please her. It embarrasses me to admit that. But I did. I wanted to please everyone, which is how you end up pleasing no one, especially not yourself. The months before the wedding blurred into a discipline of lists. The invitation suite. The menu. The seating chart that my mother defended like territory. There was a whole algebra to it. Balancing who had offended whom, who expected to be honored, who must never face who. You don't understand politics, my mother would say, dragging names across a spreadsheet like soldiers on a field. You think it's about love. It's about order. Kareem was there, but not here, if that makes sense. He messaged between meetings. He came to family dinners. He was kind to my father and brought my mother's thoughtful pastries from new cafes. He was in love with what he thought our marriage could be. We'll travel, he said. We'll do a joint project, your words, my solutions. He had an easy ability to look toward the good. I admired it, even as it sometimes flattened the hills in front of us into a pretend plain. And then there was Leela. I wish I could say Leela arrived like a storm, but she had always been in the weather. She was my cousin on my mother's side, daughter of my mother's older sister, Serena, who seemed to my mother like the universe's guarantee that someone could be perfect without trying. Leela was beautiful in a way that people used in arguments. At least she's not hard on the eyes, they'd say, forgiving missteps because of cheekbones. We were born 2 months apart, grew up in the same extended family, shared clothes that never fit me as well as they fit her. She was the first to sleep over in the apartment after my parents moved out of the old neighborhood. The first to come with me to a college party and then leave early with a boy who went to business school because he had potential. She had perfected a tone that sounded like inclusion but tasted like critique. "You're so devoted," she would say admiringly to my face. To others, she's earnest. Ernest is cute. When the engagement news went out, Layla sent a voice note filled with glitter and congratulation and something like relief. "Finally," she sang. "Finally, someone who deserves you." Later, she took me shopping and made me try on gowns that pooled on the floor like regret. "You need something that says understated wealth," she advised, photographing me in a dressing room mirror. "Not too flashy, because you're grounded." Grounded, earnest, quiet, soft compliments made of crumbs. My Aunt Sarah watched quietly from the edges of all this. She had declined a role in planning on the grounds that she wanted to be present. She repeated the word with shy delight, like it had chosen her after years of being overlooked. At my Mendi, she sat beside me painting neat flowers on the hands of children and wrapped my fingers in a thread she called a blessing braid. 3 strands of yellow, green, and white. For energy, clarity, and peace, she told me, tying the knot with reverence. Though I suppose clarity is the last thing weddings allow. "Why do you say that?" I asked, keeping my voice low because my mother was near, instructing the photographer to capture joy and only joy. Sarah looked at me, then looked away. "Because there's always something nobody says," she murmured. "We build rituals like rooms to hide in. But they're all windows if you stand still enough." I should have asked her then. Why did she leave our house years ago? Why had she never married? Why did she look at my mother like you look at someone carrying a glass just at the edge of shattering? But it is hard to ask questions in a family that punishes answers. As the day got closer, the rehearsals tightened like a fist. The night before the ceremony, my mother organized a final walkthrough at the venue. A colonial lira building turned into a banquet hall with ceilings that promised a grandeur we couldn't quite afford but were determined to simulate. "We aim for excellence," she said to the event manager, who nodded because nodding was the safest currency. We circled through entrances and exits. The DJ cued the songs we had fought about 4 weeks. Daniel trailed behind me, yawning. He's 22, soft-spoken like my father, with a humor that crept up on you. He resented the spectacle but liked me enough to pretend otherwise. "Blink twice if you need me to set off the fire alarm tomorrow," he whispered, bumping my shoulder with his. I smiled, then released it before my mother could confiscate it. "You're not allowed to cause scandal," I said, adjusting the dupatta that kept sliding. "Oh, we're doing scandal," Danielle said. "It's just a question of who gets to star in it." Leela arrived late, breathless with apologies and content. "Sorry, darlings," she sang, kissing air near my cheeks. Traffic was unruly. She wore a dress brighter than the lights. The event manager blinked as if he had been momentarily blinded. Lila moved through the space like an MC, positioning herself at angles where the camera would reward her. During the mock entrance, she tugged at my elbow. "You should watch your left side," she whispered, helpful as a bee. "It's not your best." "What is my best?" I asked, hating how small I sounded. "Your eyes," she said, and then added generously, "and your heart. People feel that, You're very sincere." Sincere, earnest, grounded, quiet. I wondered if I could string the words together and wear them like a necklace. Kareem slipped in halfway through, apologizing in a way that made everyone forgive him. He kissed my forehead in front of my parents, and my parents allowed the display because he was the groom. And we had agreed to modernity in portions. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Investors, you know," he always said investors like a weather pattern he didn't control. "It's okay," I said. It had to be okay. We were so close to the finish line. It was the wrong time to be honest about how lonely the race felt. The rehearsal bled into a dinner at our house, smaller and louder than the venue had been. In the kitchen, Leela supervised the plating as if the food might misbehave. Nazreen arrived around 8 with a gift bag and a list of improvements. "Tomorrow," she said, pulling me aside. "Chin up, shoulders back. It gives you length. Also, speak less. Let the elders be prominent. We do not want attention." She glanced briefly toward my aunt, who was washing her hands at the sink, her bangles tinting the water with light. Some people attract the wrong kind. I felt something cold inside me, something I pretended was ice and not fear. Sarah dried her hands on a towel and smiled at me. "Are you sleeping tonight?" she asked kindly. "I have chamomile. And a story if you like. The past works as a lullaby sometimes." Another time, my mother cut in smoothly. "Myra needs rest, not nostalgia." "You make nostalgia sound like a disease," Sarah said softly. "And you make it sound like a cure," my mother returned, with the practiced ease of someone fencing with an opponent she had memorized. "We should focus on tomorrow." Sarah's mouth tightened, then softened. "Tomorrow?" she echoed, and I shivered because the word felt heavy with things we weren't saying. In bed, I lay awake listening to the house creak, to my father closing shut the last door, to Daniel murmuring into his headset to friends he'd promised to play one last game with before all this adult theater swallowed us. From down the hall, I heard my mother's voice in its late-night register, lower, less performative. "No mistakes," she said to someone, my father perhaps, or herself. "No surprises." I pressed my palms together under my cheek as if I could pray us into a version of the future where everything behaved. I dreamed of corridors. In the dream, I was walking down a long hallway lined with mirrors. But the mirrors reflected other people's faces. My mother smoothing her hair, Nazreen lowering her gaze to inspect me, Lila smiling with all her teeth, Kareem waving from far away like he was at the end of a pier and the tide was rising, Danielle fiddling with a broken joystick, my father counting. And then my aunt appeared in the mirror not as a reflection but as herself. She pressed a finger to her lips. "Listen," she said, and when I tried, the hallway filled with static. I woke at 4, poured water from the carafe beside my bed, and stood at the window drawing pictures in the condensation. The street below was quiet, that special quiet cities keep before dawn. A stray dog trotted past like a rumor. In the room across the hall, a lamp flicked on. A silhouette passed. For a moment, I thought it was my mother. Then the shadow sat and did not move for so long I knew it was my father. He sits when he worries, like he can hold still enough to negotiate with it. He found me in the kitchen 20 minutes later, making tea I wouldn't drink. "Nervous?" he asked, voice careful, as if the word might spill. "Performative," I said before I could stop myself. "Tomorrow I need to be perfect." He smiled, tired and tender. "Perfect is expensive," he said. "We can't afford it. Let's aim for kind." I swallowed Baba. "Can I ask you something?" He nodded. "Why did Bua move out?" I asked, using the old name because 4 in the morning felt like the right time for old names. "You've never said? You and Mama fight about it without fighting." He looked into his cup like it could answer for him. "Your aunt chose a different path," he said at last. "Sometimes different looks like disloyal in families. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it isn't." "That's not an answer," I said. "It's the only one I can give," he replied, and when he lifted his eyes to mine, there was a grief there that surprised me. "But I can say this. She loves you. She always has." "I know," I said, and I did, in the way you know light loves windows. The morning of the wedding unfolded like a drill. Hair, makeup. The photographer arriving with a smile that had been polished on 10,000 brides. Think of someone you love, she said, adjusting my chin. No, think of yourself as someone you love. She meant it kindly, but the words landed on me like a dare. Nasreen sent a handler from the salon with a box of jewelry and an opinion about the angle of my dupatta. My mother corrected the handler's opinion with her own. Layla drifted in at noon with a bouquet she claimed to have arranged herself. I wanted to make something that feels like you, she said, presenting roses and eucalyptus. Simple and pure. I took them, trying to ignore the faint burn of implication. Danielle hovered, handing me water, making faces at the makeup artist when she pinched my eyebrows. Hey, he said lightly, when I stared too long at my reflection. Remember when we were small and I tied your shoelaces together before your school recitation and you fell on stage? That was the funniest thing I've ever done. It was horrible, I said, but I was laughing, which had been the point. You got up, he reminded me. You made a joke. You bowed. Everyone clapped. You're resilient. Resilience is a terrible word, but a good muscle. Is that your speech? I teased. Because please don't. His face sobered. My speech is only 2 lines, he said. I'm proud of you. And if anyone makes you cry today, I will reprogram their car to only play the Kids Bop version of Despacito on loop. Menacing, I said. Thank you. By afternoon, the house smelled of jasmine and nerves. I sat in the upstairs room where brides were kept until the ceremony, a kind of staging area for joy. The lehenga was heavy on my hips, a practiced burden. My mother flitted in and out, rearranging my jewelry as if I were a table setting. Nasreen came once to inspect me and nodded permission granted. Kareem sent a photo of his cufflinks with the caption, "For luck." I typed, "See you soon," and deleted it. Typed, "I love you," and deleted that too. Settled for a heart. Words felt treacherous. Emojis were safer. People came to kiss my hands. Older aunties offered blessings and advice about the keeping of husbands and the management of in-laws. As if I were acquiring both categories like appliances. Serena, my mother's sister, stood in the doorway and assessed me like a dress she wouldn't buy. Elegant, she declared finally, which with her was higher than praise. Leela filmed me for her stories, telling me to turn my head just so. The light is kind to you today, she said. I wanted to ask what it was like to have light always be kind. Outside the door, I could hear music and the swell of voices. People were arriving, reacquainting, retelling the same good stories about themselves. Every family event is a festival of repetition. We try on our best parts again and again to check that they still fit. And then my aunt slipped into the room. She came without rustle or announcement, as if anyone who noticed she came would try to stop her. She wore a sari the color of early morning, a blue-gray that made me think of half-open curtains. She had lined her eyes more carefully than usual, and her bangles were the simplest ones she owned. It struck me that she was trying to make herself less visible, a compromise between showing up and not imposing. "Bua," I breathed, the word easing out like relief. She smiled, and her whole face went young. "Hello, my girl," she said. "May I sit?" I nodded, and she perched on the edge of the sofa, hands folded like she was in temple. For a moment, we just existed. Outside, a cheer went up for something I couldn't see. My heart beat in my palms. "You look like your father's mother," Sierra said softly. "No one else will see it because they're too busy seeing everything else. But I do. There's a line here." She gestured around her eyes. "It appears when you're about to laugh and when you're about to cry. Your Dottie had it. It's a brave line." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Thank you," I whispered, and then, surprising myself, "Stay with me." "I will," she said simply. "Until it's time." Time like a guest we were waiting for. I stared at our hands, at how hers were browned by sun and my fingers were pale under the henna. Questions rose like bubbles in a glass of soda. I watched them fizz, then disappear before I could drink. "Bua," I said finally. "Why did you leave?" She looked toward the window, where the curtain breathed in the air from the hall. For a second, I thought she would deflect. Then her shoulders lifted and fell. "Because I chose a truth your mother could not forgive," she said. I felt the floor shift under me. "A truth?" I asked. In a manner of speaking, she replied, the words like a gate half open. It's not for now. But I want you to know that choosing truth is not the same as choosing cruelty. People conflate them when truth threatens their architecture. My mother's architecture, I said, before I could stop the small betrayal. Your mother is very good at building, Syra said, and her voice was both affectionate and something like warning. She builds to protect. Sometimes protection looks like confinement from the inside. I tried to hold both ideas at once, and my hands shook. She took them gently, steadying. Listen to me, she said very quietly. Whatever happens today, you are still yourself. People will project. They will panic. They will rearrange, but yourself is not furniture. What's going to happen? I asked, coldness crawling up my spine like a vine. Is something wrong? Her eyes filled and she blinked it back. No, she lied. Or maybe it was the truth as far as she would allow. It's a wedding, and weddings are always right for someone. She glanced at the clock. I came because I wanted to give you. She paused, searching, then shook her head. Later, she said, I'll find you before the ceremony. I promise. Before I could reach for the promise and tell her to stay, my mother entered like a gust with purpose. Oh, she said, spotting Sarah, and the O was both greeting and complaint. Sarah, I didn't realize you were here, Sarah supplied, standing. Yes. My mother's smile was tight enough to strangle. We're preparing, she said to me, warmth returning to her tone like it had an on switch. Are you ready? The makeup will need a touch. Nasreen wants. I know what Nasreen wants, Sarah said softly. My mother's eyes flashed. Then you know what I want, she replied, a quiet chord of anger under her words. No disruptions. No dramatics. Farah, Sarah said, and in the way she said my mother's name was a history I did not understand. The dramatics in this family rarely come from me. My mother turned to me as if Sarah were a shadow and I was a lamp she could adjust. Smile, she instructed. Everyone will be watching. Remember who we are? Sarah's gaze flicked between us. For a heartbeat, the air stilled. Then she touched my arm. I'll see you soon, she murmured, before the ceremony. And she slipped out as quietly as she had arrived, leaving behind a tremor I could not name. My mother exhaled as if a light had turned off. She moved toward me with determined tenderness, rearranging my dupatta, smoothing the lehenga pleats, pressing powder into my already powdered skin. You look beautiful, she said, and I could hear that she meant it, and also that she needed me to be it. This is the day we have worked for. Don't let anyone steal it. I won't, I said. In my mouth it sounded like a promise. In my ears like a plea. When she left, the room felt suddenly too big. I stood, walked to the mirror, studied a stranger who resembled me. I had never looked more like a story. The thread Sarah had tied at my mendine energy, clarity, peace peeked from under my bangles. I touched it, felt the knot. The music outside smoothed into something ceremonial. The door opened and Daniel stuck his head in. Final call, bride, he announced too brightly. How do you feel? Like a piece of cake, I said, waiting for someone to cut. He winced. Okay, we're going to retire that metaphor forever. He stepped inside, lowered his voice. Mira, if you want to run, we can run. I know routes. I have cash. I laughed, and the sound scraped. I'm not running, I said. Okay, he said, studying me. But if today starts tilting, you lean on me. Promise. Promise, I echoed. It was easier to promise than to ask why he thought the day might tilt. He offered his arm like we were in a movie. I took it. The hallway swallowed us, full of flowers and people and the curation of happiness. As we walked, I scanned faces, searching for my aunts. I didn't see her. At the top of the staircase, the event manager consulted his clipboard like a sacred text. On my count, he said, 3, 2, wait, I said impulsively. I need a minute. The event manager blinked. My mother stiffened a few feet away. Nesreen frowned. Daniel squeezed my hand. I'll be a second, I said, and slipped into the small side room, a powder room, shut like a secret. It was empty, cool, a temporary sanctuary. I closed the door, leaned against it, breathed. In the mirror above the sink, my face seemed to hover, both mine and borrowed. My heart tapped a quick rhythm, tap, 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 like it was sending code. I pulled my phone from the pouch at my waist and typed to Kareem. Nerves. Tell me something true. 3 dots appeared, then vanished, then appeared again. Finally, you are the bravest person I know. And I am lucky. I stared at the words until they blurred. Then the door cracked open. I turned, expecting my mother, readying an apology. It was my aunt. She slipped inside and gently clicked the lock. Not quite closed, just enough that the room felt tinier, more held. She stood very close. Close enough for me to smell the cardamom on her breath. Close enough for me to see the way her eyeliner smudged where a tear had dried. "Boo!" I whispered, my throat narrowing. She reached for my hands and enclosed them inside hers. Her fingers were cool. With her other hand, she touched the thread around my wrist. It's a blessing braid, and smiled as if something had finally aligned. "I promised I would see you before the ceremony," she said. And her voice was careful, measured, like she was balancing on a wire over a drop. Outside, the music swelled. Voices gathered. My mother's heels clicked. The procession was poised. My aunt leaned in so close that her lips almost brushed my ear. "Listen," she breathed. "There's something you need to know." I can still hear her whisper, though I will never repeat it the way she said it, half urgency, half sorrow, as if she was both saving me and breaking me. Her breath warmed the curve of my ear as she said the words that would unravel the neat little tapestry of my wedding. "Myra, Kareem isn't marrying you for love. He's marrying you to cover up what Layla has already destroyed." For a moment, the room tilted. My chest squeezed so tight I thought my ribs would snap. I wanted to ask her to explain, to untangle the words. But the music outside thundered louder, and the event manager's voice echoed through the hall, calling for me to step into the spotlight. Sarah squeezed my hands hard, eyes glassy. "Be still," she urged. "But remember, when truth arrives, it doesn't wait for timing. It waits for courage." And then she slipped out of the powder room, disappearing into the crowd like a whisper lost in a storm. "Where have you been?" My mother's voice sliced through the hallway as I emerged. She scanned my face like an inspector looking for cracks. "I just needed a moment," I lied, forcing my lips into the practiced smile. "Don't falter now," she warned. "This is the performance of a lifetime." Performance. Yes, that was exactly what it was. Daniel looked at me strangely, almost as if he could sense the tremor beneath my skin. "You good?" he murmured. "Perfect," I replied, though the word tasted like ash. The music shifted to the bridal entrance. The doors swung open. A sea of faces turned toward me, gasping, sighing, recording. Phones rose like an army of mechanical eyes. I descended the staircase, one careful step at a time, each footfall echoing in my bones. But I didn't feel like a bride. I felt like a fraud, because in the marrow of my bones, my aunt's words repeated themselves. Louder than the orchestra, "He's marrying you to cover up what Leela has already destroyed." The stage was a theater of light and flowers. Kareem stood at the center, resplendent in his sherwani, smile, calm, eyes warm. He looked exactly as a groom should look. My heart, traitorous, leaped at the sight of him before plunging again into the abyss of doubt. He reached out as I arrived. "You look beautiful," he said softly, so only I could hear. Beautiful. I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe him. But when I glanced at Layla in the front row, her crimson dress brighter than mine, her smile sharp as glass, I felt the sting of something unspoken. Her gaze lingered on Kareem, and he faltered for the briefest second before turning back to me. It was enough. My stomach lurched. The imam began the formalities. Prayers hummed in the air. My mother sat with her chin lifted, radiating triumph. Nazreen, my soon-to-be mother-in-law, looked smug. Her lips pursed in approval as though she herself had orchestrated the universe. My aunt sat 2 rows back, shoulders drawn, eyes fixed on me as if she was silently passing strength through the air. And I sat there, heart thundering, smile glued in place. Mind reeling with the possibility that I was nothing more than a stand-in bride. As the ceremony unfolded, relatives leaned toward one another in hushed tones. I caught fragments about the decorations, the menu, the way Layla shimmered like she was the star. She outshines even the bride. One aunt whispered behind her hand. Layla was always the jewel, another replied. I clenched my fists beneath the fabric of my lehenga, nails biting into my palms. Their words dug deep, feeding the fear my aunt had planted. Layla basked in the attention, laughing softly, tossing her hair. At one point, her gaze met mine, and she raised her glass in a mocking little toast as if she knew something I didn't. Or maybe she knew exactly what my aunt had whispered. The first real crack appeared during the Nekah signing. The imam read out the vows, the witnesses gathered, and the papers were placed in front of us. My pen hovered above the page when I heard the rustle of movement to my left. Lila leaned toward Nisreen, murmuring something that made the older woman's lips curl into a smile. Then Nisreen said it, loud enough for the people nearby to hear. Well, at least this way we keep this scandal in the family. Scandal. The word dropped like a stone into the silence of my soul. A ripple went through the front rows as a few heads turned, curious. My mother stiffened beside my father, her smile frozen in place like plaster. Kareem shot his mother a warning look, but it was too late. The whisper had escaped, and my hand trembled so badly that my signature scrawled crooked across the page. A cousin snickered. Someone else muttered nerves. But I knew it wasn't nerves. It was humiliation written in ink. After the ceremony, the reception opened like a carnival music, clinking glasses, waiters weaving through the crowd. People congratulated us, took photos, forced laughter. But beneath it all ran an undercurrent of whispers, glances, the faint smell of scandal. At one point, a group of my cousins cornered me by the buffet. So, Myra, one teased, did you know you're sharing more than just a groom with Leela? The laughter that followed was jagged, cruel. What do you mean? I asked, my voice steady only because I forced it to be. Oh, nothing. Another cousin said with a smirk. Just family secrets. Ask your aunt. My cheeks burned. My eyes darted across the hall, searching for Sarah, but she was nowhere in sight. And then I saw Leela standing too close to Kareem near the dessert table, her hand brushing his sleeve, her lips curved in a secretive smile. Kareem said something quickly, shook his head, glanced around to see if anyone was watching. But I was watching. I saw it all, and so did others. I heard someone murmur, shameless, as they passed. My stomach twisted. My humiliation was no longer private, it was public, rippling through the hall like spilled wine. I slipped away to the edge of the hall near the draped curtains, where the music softened. My mother found me there, her expression tight. Pull yourself together, she hissed. Do not let them see weakness. We've worked too hard for this. Worked too hard for what? I demanded, my voice breaking. For me to be humiliated in front of everyone? For whispers about scandal to follow me down the aisle? Her eyes flashed, but her grip on my arm tightened. Appearances matter more than feelings. You will learn that. I pulled away, my heart splintering. Maybe you already have. It happened during the first dance. Kareem and I stood in the center. The lights dimmed, the music swelling. All eyes were on us. He held me gently, whispered, ignore them. It's just noise. But then I heard Leela's voice, clear as a bell, rising above the crowd in mock admiration. Doesn't it look like she's dancing in my place? Laughter exploded from a cluster of cousins. Heads turned. Cameras captured my face in that moment of shock, of raw humiliation. I froze in Karim's arms, my body stiff. His smile faltered, his eyes darting nervously. He tried to pull me closer, but I pushed him away and stepped back, trembling. The music kept playing. The audience kept watching. And I, the bride, stood alone in the spotlight, humiliated, mocked, and betrayed. From the corner of the hall, I saw my aunt watching me with sorrowful eyes. She had warned me. She had tried. And in that instant, I understood. The whispers were not just rumors. They were pieces of a truth too heavy for the family to carry, a truth they had buried beneath flowers and vows. But now it was clawing its way to the surface, and soon it would explode. I had never felt so hollow in my life. The laughter from Leela's cruel remarks still echoed in the hall even as the music swelled to cover it. I stood under the spotlight, my hands trembling while Karim's arm hung uselessly in the air where I had pushed it away. All around us, the family pretended to be composed, but the air vibrated with whispers. Phones had already captured my expression. I knew those images would circulate among cousins, friends, and acquaintances long after the night ended. The humiliation had been stitched into memory. And then, amid the murmur, I heard a chair scrape back. A sound louder than it should have been. My Aunt Cerise stood. At first I thought she was simply leaving, as she often did when tension overwhelmed her. But no, she walked forward, her blue-gray sari swaying like a wave in the bright lights. Heads turned. My mother's eyes widened. Nesreen's lips pressed into a thin line. And then my aunt did something unimaginable in our family. She raised her voice. Enough. The words sliced through the hall like a blade. The music faltered, then cut. The laughter died. Even Leela froze, her smile stiffening mid-performance. Enough of whispers, Sarah continued, her voice shaking but strong. Enough of secrets and lies disguised as family honor. She turned toward me, her eyes softening. Mira deserves truth. Tonight, before God and before all of you, she deserves truth. My knees weakened. My mother had froze from her chair. Sarah, she hissed, sit down. Not here, not now. But my aunt didn't sit. She lifted her chin, her voice carrying with a clarity I had never heard from her before. This wedding, she declared, was never meant to be Myra's. It was meant to be Lila's. Gasps erupted. My head spun. My heart slammed against my ribs. What are you talking about? I whispered, but my voice was drowned by the rising commotion. Sarah pressed on, louder now. Karim and Layla were engaged unofficially, secretly, but engaged in everything that matters. They met long before Mira ever entered the picture. Their relationship was known to some, hidden from others. And when it fell apart, it left behind a scandal no one wanted to speak of. The room buzzed like a hive. Guests shifted uncomfortably, phones tilted to record, mouths covered in shock. Karim's face drained of color. Aunt Sarah, please, he began, but she cut him off. No, Karim. You do not get to pretend silence is kindness. Myra was brought into this as a replacement, to salvage reputations, to protect families, to sweep mistakes under brocade and flowers. Her words struck like thunder. I looked at Karim, searching for denial, for reassurance, for something. But he only stared at the floor, jaw clenched. His silence was louder than any admission. Lila shot up from her chair, her face crimson. That is a lie, she cried. Aunt Sarah is making things up to ruin me. She has always been jealous, always meddling. But Sarah's gaze was steady. If it is a lie, then tell us why Karim spent half his nights last year outside your apartment. Tell us why you wept in my arms when you thought he would not marry you. Tell us why Nazreen begged Farah to find a better option when you were seen together at that hotel. Gasps again, sharper this time. Leela's lips parted, but no sound came. I turned slowly to my mother. Her face was pale, frozen, her hands clutching her dupatta like a shield. Mama, I whispered, my voice breaking. Is this true? Her eyes darted to mine, full of guilt she could not swallow. And that was my answer. Finally, Karim stepped forward, his voice desperate. Mira, listen, please listen. It's not what it looks like. Yes, Layla and I. We were close. Too close. But it was reckless, it was wrong. I ended it. I wanted something better, something real. That's you. You are real to me. But his words felt hollow too late. I saw the flicker of panic in his eyes, the way he glanced at his mother for support, the way Leela's lips curled in scorn. You married me to fix a scandal, I said, my voice shaking. Not to love me. No, he cried. I chose you because I love you now. Whatever happened before, it's gone. But the past wasn't gone. It was standing right there, wrapped in red silk and smugness, laughing at me in front of the world. The hall had erupted into chaos. Aunts whispered furiously. Uncles shook their heads. Cousins snickered with thinly veiled satisfaction. "Did you hear?" Someone muttered. "She was just a replacement bride." Another whispered, "Poor girl." "How humiliating." I felt my cheeks burn, my throat tighten. It was as if the entire hall had turned into a tribunal and I was the accused. Nesrine rose from her seat at last, her voice sharp. "This is not the place for such vulgar displays. Sarah, you shame us all. Mira, be wise. A bride must know when to forgive and when to endure. That is what keeps families intact. Forgive, endure. Words designed to trap women in cages." I clenched my fists. "And what about truth?" I demanded, my voice louder than I expected. "Do we keep families intact by burying truth under shame? By selling daughters as replacements?" The room went silent. Even the chandeliers seemed to pause. Sarah stepped closer to me, her hand hovering near my shoulder as if offering strength. "Mira, child," she said, her voice breaking now. "This is what I could not bear to let happen. Your mother believed she was saving face, saving future, saving you. But saving built on lies is not salvation, it's betrayal." She turned to the crowd too. My mother, to Nesrine, to Kareem. "And betrayal has a price. Tonight, you must all watch as truth is spoken aloud. Tonight, you will see who bleeds under the silk." My mother finally broke, her voice trembling. "Sarah, stop. You don't understand. I understand perfectly," my aunt said, eyes blazing. "You think Mira is too soft, too kind to bear the truth. But she is stronger than any of us. She deserves to know what game has been played with her life." And in that moment, I knew my aunt had given me a gift. Not cruelty, but clarity. I looked around the hall, the family who whispered, the cousins who mocked, the mother who betrayed me, the groom who used me, the cousin who envied me. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of their judgment. My humiliation was already public. But now, so was their truth. I straightened my back, lifted my chin. Daniel's eyes met mine from across the hall, full of silent encouragement. My father sat frozen, tears glistening, unable to defend me, but silently begging forgiveness with his gaze. And then I spoke. "You all wanted a performance," I said, my voice steady, echoing through the speakers. "Well, here it is. Watch closely. Because tonight, the bride refuses to play your role." The crowd gasped again. Lila smirked, thinking she had won. But she had no idea that this was not the end. It was only the beginning. Because the truth was out. Justice was coming. I have never forgotten the silence that followed my words. For the first time that night, the hall was not filled with whispers or laughter or forced applause. It was filled with breathless expectation. Everyone was waiting to see what I, the humiliated bride, would do. And for once, I wasn't going to disappoint them. I stepped forward, away from Kareem, away from the stage set like a gilded prison. My lehenga's heavy fabric trailed behind me. Its embroidered flowers no longer a costume, but a kind of armor. I turned slowly, letting my gaze sweep across the room. "You all have treated me like a prop in a play," I said, my voice firm. "Something to decorate, to move into place, to be watched but never heard. Tonight, that ends." The guests shifted uncomfortably, their faces reflecting a mixture of fascination and horror. My mother looked stricken, her eyes darting between me and the audience like she could still salvage this. Kareem took a step forward, but I raised my hand to stop him. "No," I said. "You've spoken enough lies for both of us." A murmur ran through the hall. My gaze found Layla still standing in her crimson dress, her lips curved in defiance. "You," I said, my voice sharp as glass. "You thought you could laugh at me, mock me, humiliate me in front of everyone. But what you didn't realize is that you were only exposing yourself." Her eyes narrowed. "Oh, please, Mira, don't act like a martyr. You were never meant for Kareem. You're too ordinary. A ripple of cruel chuckles spread through a few cousins. I held up my hand, silencing them. Ordinary, I repeated. Maybe, but at least I am honest. At least I am not a coward who hides behind whispers and manipulates family into covering her mistakes. Leela's cheeks flushed red. You don't know what you're talking about? Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about, I cut in. Tell them, Leela. Tell them how you tried to secure Kareem for yourself. How you flaunted your affair until your own mother begged for silence. Tell them how you ruined your own engagement and expected my family to rescue you by throwing me into the fire. The room buzzed with shock. Some guests gasped audibly. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Leela's facade cracked, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. I turned to Kareem next. My voice dropped low but dangerous. And you let them do it. You let them parade me in front of you as if I were a shield for your shame. You could have told me the truth. You could have chosen respect. But you chose silence. He stepped closer, desperation in his eyes. Mira, I was wrong, but I swear— No, I interrupted. You don't get to swear anything to me. Not now. You didn't love me enough to trust me with the truth. That is not love. That is cowardice. The weight of my words landed heavily. Kareem faltered, his shoulders slumping. For the first time that night, I saw him not as a groom. Not as the man I had once believed in, but as a boy caught in the web of his mother's schemes and his own weakness. And I realized I deserved more. Then I turned to my mother. She had always been the architect, the puppeteer, pulling the strings. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, but her lips trembled with the instinct to control. You, I said, pointing directly at her. You who raised me to believe appearances matter more than truth. You who taught me that survival means silence. You betrayed me most of all. Myra, she whispered, her voice breaking. I was protecting you. If I hadn't agreed, people would have talked. Your future would have been ruined, my future, I snapped. Or your reputation. Tell me, Mama, which one did you really care about? Her silence was my answer. The hall had grown electric. All eyes locked on me. And in that moment, clarity washed over me like a storm breaking open. I had been humiliated, mocked, betrayed, but I wasn't powerless. I took a deep breath, then raised my voice so everyone could hear. I will not be your scapegoat. I will not be your replacement. And I will not stay married to a man who cannot even defend me against his own sins. Gasps erupted again. Someone cried out, "She's leaving him." Yes, I declared. This wedding ends here. Tonight, I reclaim myself. Tonight, I walk away from this farce with my dignity intact. And then, in front of everyone, family, friends, and strangers, I remove the heavy dupatta from my head and let it fall to the floor. The jeweled veil that symbolized obedience, silence, submission, it no longer belonged to me. The hall erupted into chaos. Some shouted in shock. Some clapped. Some shook their heads in disbelief. But I stood taller than I ever had before. And then something unexpected happened. Daniel stood. My quiet, gentle brother who rarely spoke at family gatherings suddenly raised his voice. My sister is right, he said firmly. We have lived too long under lies. You all gossip about honor while destroying the only person who showed it. If you want to whisper scandal, whisper this. Mira chose herself, and that makes her stronger than any of you. My father, eyes brimming with tears, stood too. I should have defended her sooner, he said, his voice cracking. But I will defend her now. Enough is enough. Their support bolstered me. For the first time, I felt the power of family not as chains, but as wings. Meanwhile, Layla tried to salvage her pride. So what if Kareem and I had history? She snapped. At least he loved me once. No one will remember you after tonight, Mira. You'll be the girl who walked out. I smiled coldly. No, Leela. I'll be the woman who walked away. And you'll be remembered as the cousin who destroyed her own chance at happiness and tried to steal mine. The crowd murmured in agreement. The tide was turning. Kareem dropped to his knees in front of everyone, tears streaming. Mira, please, don't leave me. I made mistakes, but I can make it right. I will love you, I swear it. Just give me a chance. I looked down at him, and for a flicker of a moment, I saw the man I had once cared for. But then I remembered the laughter, the whispers, the betrayal. You should have loved me before you humiliated me, I said quietly. Now it's too late. I turned my back on him. The chandeliers glittered above me. The music had stilled. The entire hall was frozen in disbelief. And I, the bride who refused to be broken, walked down the aisle not as a humiliated woman, but as someone reclaiming her story. My aunt hurried to my side, her hand warm on mine. You did it? She whispered, tears shining in her eyes. No, I said, my voice steady. We did it. You gave me the truth. I gave it a voice. And together, we walked out of that hall, leaving behind the ruins of their carefully constructed lies. The justice had been delivered. Not with vengeance, not with cruelty, but with courage. And the silence I left behind was louder than any applause. The night air wrapped around me like a bomb as I stepped out of the hall, leaving behind the chaos and gasps and fractured masks of dignity. My feet felt lighter without the weight of the dupatta, without the crushing stage lights, without the stares that had pinned me like a butterfly to velvet. For the first time in months, no, in years, I could breathe. Daniel caught up with me first, out of breath, his tie loose around his neck. You were magnificent, he said, grabbing my shoulders. His voice trembled with pride and relief. I thought you might crumble, but you didn't. You shattered them instead. I smiled faintly, exhaustion settling in. I didn't feel magnificent. I felt like I was drowning. But something inside me refused to stay under. That's called strength, he said simply. My father emerged next, his usually composed face streaked with tears. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he pulled me into a hug that shook with regret. Forgive me, Beta, he whispered. I should have protected you. I should have been your shield. I failed. I leaned into him, letting myself cry into his shoulder. You didn't fail tonight, Baba. You stood up. That's what matters. Behind him, my mother appeared. Her face was pale, her lips trembling. But her eyes, the eyes that had always demanded perfection, were filled with something I had never seen before. Shame. She reached for me hesitantly, as if I might reject her touch. Myra, she said, her voice cracking. I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I was protecting you. I thought I raised a hand, stopping her. No, Mama, you thought you were protecting yourself. Your reputation, your place among them. I nodded toward the hall where the murmurs still swelled like a hive of bees. But you forgot to protect me. Tears spilled down her cheeks. For once, she had no sharp words, no commands, no lectures. Just silence. And in that silence, I found a strange peace. Because I finally saw her not as an unshakable tower, but as a woman flawed, afraid, desperate. I could not excuse her, but I could understand her. I will heal, I told her gently. But not by pretending this never happened. Not by silencing myself. If you want to be part of my life, Mama, you'll have to learn to live with truth. She bowed her head, and for the first time in my life, my mother looked small. As we stood in the courtyard, Kareem stumbled out after us. His Sherwani was askew, his hair mussed, his eyes wild. Mira, wait. He called, his voice raw. I turned slowly, the distance between us already larger than any step could cover. Please, he begged, his hands trembling. Don't leave me like this. I swear I'll prove myself. I'll love you like you deserve. Just don't let tonight be the end. I studied him. This man who had once made me laugh, who had spoken of building a future with me. I searched for sincerity, for courage, for something real. But all I saw was desperation born of exposure, not love. You had your chance, I said softly, and you chose lies. One, choose myself. His shoulders collapsed. He sank onto the steps, sobbing, while his mother hovered uselessly behind him. And I felt nothing. No anger, no longing, no pity. Just release. From the doorway, Leela appeared, her crimson dress now garish under the harsh lights. Her face was twisted with rage. "You think you've won?" she spat. "You'll be nothing without this marriage. Nothing." I met her gaze steadily. "No, Leela, I'll be free. That's everything." Her eyes widened, her fury consuming her. She spun on her heel and stormed back inside, but I knew her reputation would follow her like a shadow. No more whispers hidden in corners. Now the scandal had a face, and it wasn't mine. Sarah stood quietly nearby, her hands clasped. When the others drifted back inside, leaving us alone, I turned to her. "You saved me," I whispered. "No," she said softly. "You saved yourself. I only gave you the key." I touched her arm. "What was it, Bua?" "The truth that made you leave all those years ago." Her eyes glistened. "It was the same truth I gave you tonight. That silence is poison." I refused to swallow it anymore, so they pushed me out. But I have no regrets. I would rather live alone in truth than die surrounded by lies. I nodded, my throat tight. "Then I will live the same way." She smiled, proud and sad all at once. "Good, because you were never meant to be ordinary, Myra. You were meant to be free." The days that followed were brutal. The wedding was the talk of the town. Stories twisted, exaggerated, embellished. Some painted me as the tragic bride, others as the defiant rebel. But I didn't care. For once, I wasn't afraid of their voices. I moved into my aunt's small apartment for a while. It smelled of books and chai and sunlight, a far cry from the cold polish of my parents' house. She let me cry when I needed, rage when I needed, sit in silence when I needed. Slowly, I began to find myself again. I returned to my work, pouring my heart into stories that mattered. I spent evenings walking by the sea, letting the waves remind me of resilience. I laughed with Danielle, who visited often, bringing snacks and jokes to fill the quiet. And one day, my mother came to see me. She didn't bring demands or criticisms. She brought her hands empty but trembling and asked, "Can we start again?" It wasn't easy. Forgiveness never is. But I let her sit, let her listen, let her feel the weight of her choices. And for the first time, we spoke not as mother and daughter bound by expectation, but as women learning how to be honest. Looking back, I realized that night was both an ending and a beginning. Yes, I was humiliated. Yes, I was betrayed. Yes, I lost the wedding I thought I wanted. But I gained something far greater myself. I learned that family honor built on lies is no honor at all. That love without truth is not love, but manipulation. That silence may seem safer, but it rots you from within. And I learned that courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about choosing to speak even when your voice shakes. Choosing to walk away even when your heart breaks. If you ask me now whether I regret what happened, I'll tell you this. I regret nothing. Because the night my aunt whispered the truth before the ceremony, the world froze. But in that frozen moment, I woke up. And once you wake, you never go back to sleep. I am Mira. I am not a prop or a scapegoat or a replacement bride. I am the woman who chose truth. And that will always be enough. And that, my friends, is where my story ends. Not in shame, but in truth. If you felt every twist, every betrayal, and every moment of justice as deeply as I did, don't leave just yet. Hit that like button to let me know you stood with me. Drop a comment below and tell me what you would have done if you were in my place. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell because I have so many more stories of betrayal, revenge, and redemption to share with you. Until next time, remember, secrets can break families, but truth will always set you free.